please subscribe and don't forget to press the bell icon to get notified whenever we upload a new video.
Moment, there goes the bell. It's flat as flat can get. 6 points higher on the Nifty and 62 higher on the Sensex. Sensex doing a tad better. The Nifty Bank is also opening lower, but you can hardly call it low. It's 26 down. That's what, not even 0.1%. Nifty sees its first red tick. Again, it's also slight. It was just about 1 point down. So this is a very, very flat start. What are the gainers? GAIL, Vedanta, SBI, Bharti, Airtel, Sun Pharma, Power Grid. So basically, it's very derelict. There's no theme. All kinds of stocks are rising for individual reasons. There is one drug stock, there's one bank, there are resource stocks, there's BPCL, there's a Tech Mahindra. In the top 5, 6, 7 gainers, there doesn't seem to be one single theme. Among the losers, okay, Lupin's down about 2%, Bharti Infratel, Axis Bank has lost about 1%, Coal India's peaked off, ICICI Bank, ITC, Reliance showing a little bit of weakness, little, 1/3 of a percent, L&T as well. So minor weakness in some of the stocks. I'm not able to detect any specific theme. The mid-caps, minor outperformers.
Yes, minor outperformance. I guess you just say that it's a consolidation start, that is consolidation, especially in the Sensex and the Nifty. The mid-caps are doing a tad bit better. In terms of individual stocks, you have JSW Steel that's up almost about 3% ahead of its addition to the Nifty. That's looking pretty good. Bharat Forge, ever since it announced that, ever since that defense order was announced, Bharat Forge has been rising. In fact, Deutsche Bank this morning came out with a note where they have a target price of 830 on Bharat Forge. That stock is moving up with quite a bit of gusto. Adani Enterprises has been doing very well, so up almost about 2% over there. You have a couple of these stocks, Balkrishna Industries, which was Ashwini's call, is up almost about 1% or so. TTK Prestige is moving with a lot of strength this morning. In fact, the day, or rather the start, belongs to the metals. So not just JSW Steel, Nalco is doing very well too. That's up almost about 3% or so. A lot of positive brokerage calls coming in there. Let's take a look at what Jet Airways is up to this morning. Remember, there is some relief in terms of, some money coming in for them. So 2% higher on Jet Airways in addition to what we saw yesterday. And a couple of these pharmaceutical names like Suven Life Sciences, etc., continue to move higher. That's about the list of gainers. On the losing side, you have Reliance Communications, that's down 2%, PC Jewelers, Adani Transmission, Lupin, of course, on that exclusion is down about 1.5%. And some of the banks are under a bit of pressure. IDBI Bank and ICICI Bank are just a tad bit under pressure. But don't lose sight of some of the, the stocks hitting all-time highs. JSW Steel, by the way, is at a new high, a 52-week high this morning. And you have TCS that hit an all-time high in the first tick and has cooled off a tad bit. Otherwise, the start is flat.
Oh, yes, it's flat. It's opened close to yesterday's low, so that perhaps could be interesting opportunity. Adani Enterprises, the news, no news, just flies 3% higher once again on that stock. Of course, along with JSW Steel, perhaps 2 stocks of the morning. Ashwini, your thoughts on market opening and what's the trade here?
See, the first trade I have bought into the Bank Nifty, my sense is that we are about yesterday's lows. So if we have to bounce back, this is a good time to get into it. Yes, early morning, some rupee, etc. So this created a good opportunity, and if you buy here, your risk reward is extremely favorable. So my sense is today is going to be a metals type of day. JSW Steel has opened very well. Axis Bank continues on the upside. So, this early morning dip is more likely to get bought into.
Even as you were speaking, it went up from 28,193 to 28,210, Ashwini. But what would be your stop loss for that buy?
On Bank Nifty?
Yes, yes.
Yeah, 28, 150, 180, basically yesterday's low.
Okay, fair enough. Sudarshan, anything that's moved into your zone now?
Yes, I explained we are not doing anything in the indices, but Vedant and Eicher Motors are both buying opportunities for different reasons. Okay. Vedant and Eicher Motor.
Okay. There is this little stock, Trident. I don't think it's got a decent volume. 5 lakh shares traded already. Any of you look at it? Mitesh, do you? It's got some good news coming for it with IKEA giving it a clean chit.
No, I haven't been looking at the stock.
Okay. Stock has risen and done well for the week as well.
Okay, well, Bharat Forge has also been moving up quite a bit. We discussed that stock with a couple of our guests. But Ashwini, at 664, how does Bharat Forge look? Of course, new defense opportunities, etc. But for a trading call?
See, basically auto ancillary, defense, it hasn't worked out. I mean, for 4 years I've been hearing, BEL will do this and that. I don't think much has happened there. And in any case, autos and the auto ancillaries aren't doing so well. But if you mean downside, that way, downside is probably 600, 620. And once we cross the 690 zone, which is the 200-day moving average, then it could head up to the upper end of the range. But overall, it's not very exciting.
Okay, news on Reliance Infra. That deal of selling the transmission business to Adani Transmission will be closed today. That's a stock which has done well right now, up about close to 1%. So that's flashing on the screen right now. They'll be using the money, of course, to pay down debt. They are sitting on a mountain of debt, so obviously they need to do that and focusing on some other businesses. So Ashwini, what's the big call for the day then?
I think Bank Nifty will surprise you because, overall, the usual rupee down, this, that, all that is now in the price. So my sense is it's held on to moving averages early in the day. Probably a few shorts are trapped. So you may get surprised with Bank Nifty. Once it crosses previous highs, it has the potential to go ballistic.
Okay, well, gentlemen, thanks a lot for joining us and taking us through the opening tick. For now, it's absolutely flat. But yes, we've been hitting new highs day after day. Good time to welcome Gautam Shah, the Associate Director and Technical Analyst of JM Financial, who joins us now. Gautam, you've been telling us time and again that this is a bull market and you should stay invested and stick to the party. Should we sort of move closer to the door, or should we be in the middle of the room in this bull market party?
Morning, Sonia. I think you should be far, far away from the door. I think a month back when we were celebrating new highs at 11,100, I made the point that while market might be at highs, the sentiment was pretty much at a 52-week low. And with the kind of run that we've seen in the last 3 weeks, that's pretty much validated. Obviously, the sentiment has got better, but it's still not over the top. And I think the way the market setup is right now, you just need to understand that India has become the poster boy in the global equities basket. You look at it versus rest of Asia, versus Europe, or versus even the US, which has had a phenomenal run in the last a few years. I think Indian markets is out there, and you just cannot ignore Indian markets in the current scheme of things. I think there are a lot of positives that are working in for our markets right now. Number one, our markets are not overbought. I think there is this fascination of looking at the screen, looking at the price action, and the fact that we've run so hard to 11,700 levels that people believe that the market is overbought. Actually, the small adjustments which happen from time to time, the short pauses that the market has taken from time to time in the last many weeks, that has helped the market, get away with all the negativity. And we would like to believe that this market is clearly headed a lot more higher, and there is no reason to believe that we might be overbought even at 11,700 levels. Secondly, the market enjoys a lot more leadership. Earlier it was only about a couple of sectors, but right now I think a lot more sectors have started to participate. The rally has got really broad-based, large caps and mid caps, and that's really not allowing the markets to even pull back 100, 200 points. Thirdly, I think the global market setup is much better. A month back, a couple of months back, given the US-China factor, we were worried what it could lead to, what it could do to our markets. But all of that has been absorbed, and I think most global markets have also started to turn up. So that's really positive, because India is piggybacking on the momentum that you are seeing in the global markets right now. And politics has got much more stable. The flows have got much better. So all of these factors, should help the Nifty scale of levels on the upside. And we have been working with that target of about 12,000, and we believe that the Nifty should get there possibly in the next few weeks itself. Just for the near term, there is some resistance around the 11,800 area. So you could see some consolidation there, because in the last couple of weeks, the rally has been almost vertical. So some consolidation in the 11,550, 11,850 band would not be a bad thing. So that's purely from a short-term perspective. But medium term, I think we are definitely headed towards the level of 12,000. And you could even see the Sensex test a level of 40,000. But I think if you really talk of it from a 6 to 8 month perspective, we are actually updating our targets, and we believe that investors into the market, you need to now prepare for a level of as high as 12,700. So that's the new working target that we have for the next 3 to 6 months.
In fact, today it's just copybook stuff. The market opened at yesterday's low and has just bounced back, and how? And look at the mid-cap index now, up about 0.5%. Gautam, good morning. You know, that was the point. The last rally was very narrow. This rally has been broad-based, though it's led by Reliance, of course, but a lot of mid-caps have participated. The mid-cap index is still nowhere near its highs. You reckon that could be the case over the next 2 or 3 months?
Well, Anuj, given where the mid-cap index is right now, I think a lot of people would take it. I remember I was on your channel a month back and we were at 17,800 on the mid-cap index, and we said that a possible bottom could be forming and a mid-cap index should see a large recovery. So we've already recovered 10% from the low. So that's a good 2,000 point recovery that has already taken place. And I think there is room for another 700, 800 points. If you really look back, you know, the real fall happened in the month of May, June and July, when the mid-cap index fell from 20,400 all the way down to 17,700, and now this recovery has sort of become a V-shaped recovery, and this should take the mid-cap index all the way towards that level of 20,400. I think we are trading at about 19.7, 19.8 right now, so there is another 600-700 points to play for, and around 20,400, once that V-shaped recovery gets completed, you could see some consolidation. And it's good to see on a daily basis many stocks, many new sectors, you know, breaking out of a large base, and that's really going to propel this mid-cap space much higher.
The Nifty Bank, Gautam, corresponding to that 11,850 that you're expecting on the Nifty, where would the Nifty Bank look like reaching out to?
Well, Lata, the Nifty Bank index is actually much stronger at this point of time, and I think I made this point last time also. What is interesting to note is that in the last 3 weeks, while the Nifty has seen a spectacular move, the Bank Nifty has actually been in a 700-point band. It has actually underperformed, and now the Bank Nifty is laying the foundation of a much bigger breakout that gets confirmed above 28,400. And once that confirmation happens, you know, you could see the Bank Nifty running into that medium-term target of ours, which is about 30,000. So we're talking about big upside. We're not talking about 100, 200, 300 points. 1,500 points upside on the Bank Nifty in the next couple of months, I think is quite doable. And I think on the downside, it's created strong support around the 27,500 area. Also, I think whenever the banks do well, the screen just looks much better. You know, the momentum is always much better. And I think on Monday was a great example when the Bank Nifty was up almost 400 points and just the entire screen, you know, almost lit up. So I think the chart of the Bank Nifty tells me that we are nowhere near a top for the Nifty itself. And that's the confidence, I think, that will help the market scale new highs.
Okay, we are getting very important statements from the Power Secretary, and we will play those bites to you. He admits that lenders will have to take all those companies that are over 2,000 crore and stressed, but FinMin is looking at exploring Section 7. Are they? I mean, I can understand consultation with the governor, but directives, I think they will not. That's something that's never been done. The central government giving directions to the central bank, never heard of in our history. Consultation, yes. So he's possibly hinting at consultation. Lenders are working, but I mean, those are the headlines coming up for you. Very important, because now there is a high-powered panel as well looking. They have written to the governor to send a representative to the meeting, which the cabinet secretary will chair at that high-level panel that has been constituted. This is an ongoing story, very important, just to see if there will be any more time given for stressed assets to get resolved, especially power assets. We'll get back on that. Well, you know, Gautam, I wanted to ask you, within the Nifty, where will the leadership come from? Will it be private banks? Will it be Reliance? Will it be IT pharma?
Well, Lata, the leadership scene has changed quite a bit in the recent past. You know, again, if you go back to 2017, autos were actually the leader of the market, and you see what has happened in the last 8 months. They've actually taken the back seat, and now a stock like Reliance and the IT space, you know, have really led this market higher, and I think this is going to continue. But one space which I think is really going to surprise on the upside is pharmaceutical. I think it's got a phenomenal setup at this point of time. Please understand, this sector went through a 3.5-year downtrend, you know, so 3.5-year downtrend, you know, so right from 2015 to a couple of months back, it had almost lost 40% in value. And the CNX Pharma Index, as we speak, is trading at a level of around 10,000. I think the base has been formed. The breakout has happened a month back. The price momentum is excellent. The chart patterns are as clean as you can get. Some of the leaders in the space have already run really hard and are giving indications of doing much better from here. So I would like to believe that the CNX Pharma Index could move as high as 12,000 over the next 6 months. So if on an index level we are talking of a 20% upside, many of these pharmaceutical stocks, you know, will do way better. So this is one space to look at. It's been a big underperforming space, and I think it's going to really provide that support which the Nifty wants, you know, at such elevated levels. So pharma, IT, and banks, I think, would be my 3 top picks in the current scheme of things.
Okay, so from 10,000 currently on the Nifty Pharma, you expect it to go all the way to 12,000. That's a big upside. Also, I was going through your note, and JSW Steel is a stock that you like. Is it the metal space in general where you see the uptrend continue, or does the chart of JSW Steel particularly look good?
Well, can't talk about specific stocks, Sonia, but I think metals as a space has got into recovery mode. I think the rally is a little more hard worked. I don't think the rally is going to be secular. The recovery is unlikely to be secular. So you have to really look at pockets in the metal space, you know, which will do well in the next few weeks. And I would want to concentrate on stocks which did not do too badly when the metal space, you know, was underperforming. So there are top 3 or 4 names that we like, but I still feel that there are much better bets in the market in the form of IT, pharma, oil and gas, and possibly banking. So metals is more of a stock specific, you know, pick that you need to take at these levels.
Okay, the sector of the moment is now turning out to be PSU banks, led by Bank of Baroda, of course. Bank of Baroda and Canara Bank, the 2 stocks where you had falls yesterday, and I'm assuming that there were some shorts yesterday in both these stocks. They're now seeing big move. In fact, both these stocks making highs of the morning. So, you know, that's you had seen Bank of Baroda first and Canara Bank. Even actually the rupee has recovered quite a bit, so that's also playing its part. But big move right now. Gautam, anything on PSU banks?
Not really, Anuj. I think there have been a lot of false starts in the last 6 months, and every time you thought that it was genuine, it never worked out. I think the private bank setup is much cleaner. At the same time, having said that, I think the PSU banks have underperformed so much that there is a scope for a 5 to 10% relief rally. But I don't think I would really recommend a buy and hold. I think there are much cleaner setups in the market. PSU banks, you know, every time they move up a little, they are going to find a lot of resistance because I'm sure market participants are stuck up at higher levels. So I would look at other spaces from a buy and hold perspective. PSU banks purely as a trading play, you can look at it time to time.
All right. Always a pleasure hearing you on all these stocks, and you leave us even more bullish, Gautam. Thank you very much indeed for joining us today. So reaching out to 12,000 fairly shortly, and the Bank Nifty is even stronger. That's the message. There's some more good news coming for one specific stock. Sources tell CNBC TV18 that Reliance Infra is close to close to the deal to sell its Mumbai distribution business to Adani Transmission today. Kritika Saxena, who picked up this detail, is joining in. Kritika, go ahead. What all have you found out?
Morning, Lata. So what I have been able to confirm is that the deal between Reliance Infra and Adani, wherein Reliance Infra was selling their entire Mumbai distribution business to Adani Transmission, is going to be sealed today. Today evening, we are expecting the final deal closure, and the management will be meeting to finalize the details. And just a quick alert on this. They had signed an agreement in December 2017, but there were several approvals that were required. There were a couple of ups and downs with respect to regulatory nods, but I believe that those are in place now. The value of this is almost 18,800 crore rupees. So the debt of Reliance Infra is currently roughly 26,000 crore rupees. So this does significantly bring down debt. And what we understand is that the entire capital is going to be used to bring down debt. And once the transfer is done, Reliance Infra is only going to be focusing on the asset-light EPC business and defense business post-sale. So the entire power distribution business is going to be transferred to Adani. A big move for Adani, yes, given the fact that Reliance Infra distributes power to roughly about 3 million residential, industrial and commercial consumers in Mumbai across about 400 square kilometers. So it's a big move for Adani, but for Reliance Infra, it's purely about the debt reduction.
All right. Thank you very much, Kritika, for joining us. Okay, Anuj was referring to the fact that Bank of Baroda showed a fairly smart rally, rise from the day's lows. Canara Bank, Union Bank as well showing some buying at lower levels, and there is a kind of a U-turn in some of these stocks. Well, what we wanted to understand really is the impact of the end of the RBI deadline on various banks, post the RBI 27th August deadline, and of course the Allahabad saying no further relief for power companies. The question we are asking is, what is the impact on individual banks? We are joined by Papia Sengupta, the Executive Director at Bank of Baroda. Good morning, Ms. Sengupta. Thank you very much for joining us. What is your exposure to those 70 odd assets which may have to be either taken to NCLT or resolved after August 27th?
Yeah, good morning, Lata. If we look at those assets which have more than 2,000 crore outstanding from the banking sector, as per the RBI 12 circular, we have 30 of these assets which, if not resolved, will need to go to the NCLT. But our total would be around 11,000 odd crores. But we don't see much problem there, because we have been adequately taking provisions in these. And out of these, I think we have 11 assets which are in the power sector itself. So of which we think in a few of them there will be some resolution, but there are still around 7 of them where resolution is still not seen.
Okay. Actually, ma'am, why don't you wait on, because we've just got the Power Secretary, our colleague Anshu spoke to him, and here's what he had to say. Power Secretary Ajay Kumar Bhalla.
So what are the solutions that the empowered committee will look at, and what solutions can we expect, and how many assets can be resolved?
Often it is difficult to say. As I said, about 10 to 12 assets were under bidding by the lenders as part of the resolution outside NCLT, and bids that have been received in many cases, and it was under discussion among all the lenders for a final resolution of some of these assets. So I mean, it will be lead banks who would be able to say that how many of those could be resolved at the earliest.
But in the past, we've seen that CDR, SDR, and other means of restructuring loans have not worked, and it's been many years that these assets are still grappling with stress. How confident are you that under IBC or the solution that committee will come out with will actually help the power assets to?
See, I mean, IBC depends on who are the people who take over these assets, and for how long they can hold, and finally look for PPAs and all. But the High Power Committee definitely would like to address some of these issues in the sector on resolving some of their problems, because even if these assets are bought by another developer, some of the sectoral issues would need to be sorted out so that they don't go into further stress.
Okay. Well, we will get you more of that discussion which Anshu is having with the Power Secretary. But Ms. Sengupta, you were telling us that you have 30 assets. Of that, 11 are power assets, right? What is your provisioning for these 30 assets in general, and for these 11 assets in particular?
We are roughly provided at around 55%.
Okay. What is your estimate? I mean, how much might the haircut be for these 30 assets? Do you have a ballpark number?
See, there is going to be definitely a haircut. It may not be, I think on an average, we don't look for a resolution of more than 40% as a whole.
So 60% haircut?
Yeah, yeah.
Okay, so you're almost provided. Now, these assets that SBI has been talking about, they're talking about 7 assets, of which about 3 or 4 they're very confident. I think Prayagraj is one of them. And separately, IDBI was talking about KSK Mahanadi. In these 7 assets, which even the Power Secretary alluded to, do you have an exposure and have you signed up?
Yeah, we do have an exposure in 4 of them. Okay, we are fairly with the lenders in this resolution process.
Okay, so you suspect that what 4 will get resolved and not go to NCLT? What is your best guess? 4,
yeah,
no, we get 1, 10 first. It was a list. Sorry, yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, out of the 11 assets that I spoke to you about, 4 we are fairly confident that there will be a resolution outside the NCLT.
Okay, so that should happen in a quarter?
It should be, because I think the resolution, the lenders are all ready with it. Only I think the respective board approvals have to come, which should come.
Yeah, you know what SBI guys told us, our board has approved, the smaller banks have not yet approved. So that's why I was asking, I mean, they wouldn't refer to...
Yeah, so it does take time for the smaller banks, but I think in the these days everybody is quite concerned about the reason to have things done in time. So I think it should get approved within next 8 to 10 days. In any case, I think everybody realizes that time is of essence. So we are fairly confident that this should get through.
How much is your exposure to these 4-5 assets?
It's around roughly around 1,200, 1,300 crores. Yeah.
Okay, and you don't have any capital issues this year because if the rest of them go into NCLT, you have to provide a little more?
No, I think because whether they go to NCLT or not, we have already, I mean, these are all declared as stressed assets, and the required provisioning is there. So we don't see that as an issue, but definitely the recovery part of it is definitely an issue. Because whether we provide or not, ultimately the bank ends up taking the hit.
All right, we'll leave it at that, Ms. Sengupta. Thank you very much for joining us with details on those stressed assets. Well, there is a little more hope now that those 4 or 5 assets will get resolved, the one that SBI has been leading for resolution. We are carrying forward this theme of resolution of stressed assets and what is their impact on corporate banks, especially public sector banks. Karthik Srinivasan, the Group Head Financial Sector Ratings at ICRA, and Krishnan, the Banking and Financial Analyst at SBI Cap Securities, are joining us. Gentlemen, thank you very much for joining us. Well, first up, let me get to Karthik. Karthik, what is your sense about the likely provision number for public sector banks this year and likely losses? Because last year as well, I think they reported over 1 lakh crore in terms of losses.
I think from a banking sector point of view, specifically for public sector banks, we expect a lot of them to report losses for the current financial year as well. The exact quantum would depend on a couple of things. One is how much of resolutions happen during the year and how much at significantly lower haircuts than what one has provided. So at a broader range, last year we did see a net losses of about 1.3 lakh crore for the public sector banks. This year, the band would actually be quite wide depending on how the resolutions pan out. But I guess it should be at least...
Go ahead.
You should see 75,000-80,000 odd crores of losses for the whole year. Might be lower in case the resolution picks up.
Okay. Karthik, hi, morning. In your report, you have written that recoveries and upgrades, the increase is supported by the NCLT resolution, or at least of 2 steel accounts for the industry as a whole. But do you think this trend will sustain? Because now we're expecting the haircuts to be higher than the provision cover in many other NCLT accounts. We just heard the management of BOB also tell us that the haircuts could be as high as about 60-odd%. So do you think this trend in terms of recoveries and upgrades could sustain?
It may not be a serial upward kind of a trend. It all depends on which accounts get settled in which quarter. So Q1 we did see 2 steel accounts that really helped in terms of a higher recoveries as far as Q1 is concerned. Possibly 1 or 2 more steel accounts which could give an upside to the banks. But beyond that, it's really going to be difficult because a lot of the power sector assets, there could be higher haircuts, or the kind of upgrades that the quantum of upgrades that one saw in Q1 might need to get moderated.
Okay, the problem really will be capital. If you keep on having to provide and you're not getting write-ins from the resolved assets, you will be short on capital, right? What you have said is that 9 PSBs reported Tier 1 capital ratio lower than 7.5% as on June 30th. The minimum obviously is 7%, so 9 of them have only 7.5%. Do you think these 9 would be the guys who won't be able to grow?
Yeah, to a large extent, yes. If you really look at the PSB space, you have 11 of them in PCA. And effectively means most of them are running short on capital. Our own assessment is the 11 banks which are under PCA, in all likelihood would see a 5 to 10% degrowth as far as risk-weighted assets are concerned. So that's our baseline assessment. The only instance where they can grow is in case the government increases the allocation of capital to these banks. Given the current market situations, we're not very hopeful that they would be in a position to raise it from the non-government sources, at least as of now.
Okay. Krishnan is also
I want Krishnan to put names, since Karthik will not give us names. Krishnan, which are the public sector banks that can grow? As Karthik says, 9 of them don't have the capital unless government increases, and this year the government has other priorities. It has Ayushman Bharat, it has MSP, so I don't know whether they'll have money for bank capital. Which are the ones that can grow?
So I think that list of investable PSU banks which have growth capital would anyways be restricted to maybe 4, 5, 6 names.
So it would be what? SBI, BOB?
SBI, BOB, Indian Bank, Vijaya Bank, I believe, Canara Bank. So there are obviously larger banks which are where as Karthik mentioned, if the timing of recoveries from the NCLT, if the resolutions from NCLT, if you get lucky with the timing, then chances are you have growth capital on a recurring basis. Otherwise, you will need to moderate or recalibrate your growth expectations vis-a-vis where you stand as far as growth. But yeah, these are probably the investable universe within the PSU banks, given there are quite a few banks that are distracted and disturbed right now. Yeah.
So do you see in general the resolution of the stressed assets drive a decline in the gross NPAs, net NPAs for the banking sector over the next couple of quarters?
Quarters is difficult. I would think by the end of the year you should see resolutions for sure. You should see meaningful increase or improvement in resolution environment for sure. And that should then reduce your gross NPAs, because your debtor is now moving from a weak hand to a stronger hand. So ideally that should come with there is a single check being paid out, etc. So your gross NPAs do tend to trend lower then.
Okay. Yeah. Krishnan, Papia Sengupta was saying, the BOB ED was saying that about 60% write-off or haircut. Wasn't that optimistic?
We are a bit more optimistic than that on the power sector. But as I said, as we have said...
I'm looking at the entire average. Okay, so for some specific cases, you are expecting better than that. So better than 60%, you expect only 50% write-off.
So, Lata, the thing there is whether you're looking at principal plus capitalized interest, or whether you're looking at principal plus capitalized plus accrued interest. Okay. Right? So, the bidders are looking at only principal component. They clearly aren't worried too much about what is the capitalized interest, etc. So I think that's how the resolution processes tend to go across the world. That's how it will be in India as well. It's essentially what's gone into the construction of the project, which will essentially be what the bidder is looking at, not the capitalized interest, what is under construction. That may all go for a toss. So on principle, will you be able to get a fair bid? I would think yes. If you have loaded a lot of capitalized interest and accrued interest before recognizing as NPA, then very clearly the haircuts will be steeper in such assets where there is a significant load factor.
Okay. Karthik, can you just give us the numbers? I mean, how much do you expect by way of resolutions over the next, say, 12 to 18 months? What kind of recoveries are we looking at for the industry as a whole? And how much do you think the slippages could moderate to as a percentage of advances over the next 2 years?
If you look at slippages, if Q1, Q1 the slippages have come down quite sharply. It still remains high at about 4.7% on an annualized basis, which is better than last year of 8 and 7 in the previous year. Our estimate is with bulk of the recognition of NPAs and stress assets having been done, we believe by the end of this year we should be at a run rate of about 3% of NPA generation. And then hopefully should things stabilize, should probably hover around 2.5% to 3% going ahead. In terms of resolutions on these stressed accounts, pricing would really be the key. On one hand, we've had RBI prod banks to at least increase the provision on these assets. So to that extent, it makes it easier for the banks to take a decision. But finally, there are a lot of chunky assets, and the actual quantum of resolution would depend on which of these chunky assets gets resolved or gets taken to NCLT. Our own estimate, if we were to look from the February 12 circular point of view, most of these accounts are already classified as NPAs. Our estimate says that almost 85–90% of the so-called list would anyway have been in the NPA bucket, and most of these would have come into NPA over the last year and a half. So banks would have any case provided anywhere between 25 to 35% depending on the gestation period with the particular bank. So if you work with, let's say on an average of 50 to 60% kind of a haircut which would be required at a portfolio level, some assets could be less, some assets could be more, but at a portfolio level you're talking of another about 20% of provision to be done by the system. So very roughly you can say about another 50–60,000 crores of provisions possibly needs to be done. But yes, the actual quantum would depend on what is the haircut that finally comes about, and what sort of resolutions happen on the other accounts which are already at various stages of NCLT and resolution. So any improvement on the recoveries from the earlier accounts could lessen the burden as far as the banks are concerned on a going forward basis.
Well, let's see, we have to accept one point. There's no point talking about provisions because all these are already recognized NPAs and they're provided. All we want to know is haircut. And I've got two numbers over here. There is a Nomura report which says they expect higher than 75% haircut. And there is a Deutsche Bank report which says that they expect just about 10 to 20% recovery from the power plants referred to NCLT. If that is that you're working as well? I mean, from this, 40 assets that will go power plants, maximum Nomura gives is they will get 25%. DB says they will get only 20%.
So, I mean, in either of those reports, I think there is a distinction you have to make as to how much is being referred to NCLT. There is also resolution happening outside NCLT.
4 or 5, no, yaar.
So there's about 9 gigawatt, which is probably already resolved, right? So there is 8.8 gigawatt that's already resolved. There is another 10 to 12 gigawatt, which is probably likely to be resolved or very close to resolution, right? So the way we look at it purely from a capacity perspective, we are looking at about 50–55% of that 40 gigawatt stranded capacity will get resolved. 45% will go towards NCLT. You will have haircuts in NCLT, right?
Okay.
And purely from a bank's exposure perspective, that 2 trillion, 1.8 to 2 trillion, we think that number is closer to 58% that gets resolved and 42% that goes towards NCLT.
Okay, so this is the main takeaway from this discussion, that for that 55% of the power companies, probably the haircut will be only 60%.
See, right now these haircuts are based on fundamentals, right?
Yes,
so that's
yes,
how we
yes.
tend to work. Point is, it will depend. So right now we are in a bidder's market. If you push too many assets into NCLT, we remain in a buyer's market. There are very few takers, too many assets. So very clearly discovery will be in favor of the buyers.
Yeah.
But I think referral to NCLT versus admission and actual resolution is an 18-month process. And I think by then it moves towards more fundamental demand supply driven market. And that's where we are hopeful.
Okay, well, thank you very much.
Leave it
well,
at that.
I can just get this much in terms of numbers for if 45% of the cases are referred to NCLT, there the recovery is only 20 or 25%. That is at least one clear takeaway that comes in. But if you resolve it earlier, then maybe a little better. Thank you very much, Chris.